Hello! You found yourself watching Part 11 in my Nikke lore series. It's designed to appeal to both veterans and newcomers. We'll be flying through the story at an accelerated pace, with a section at the end for discussing larger themes and spoilers. Now that we've got plenty of the major events covered, we can hit the ground running with Chapter 15, which is kind of a light intermission of sorts. The Nikkes from Talentum, whom I covered in the previous video, want counters to help them excavate a garbage dump on the surface. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, as the surface is full of rare valuables that can be sold to the highest bidder. Our home at the outpost is still pretty messed up, thanks to all those terrorist raids, so this is our chance to make a comeback. Even so, it hasn't been long since we parted with Marion, so morale is pretty low. Talentum does their best to cheer us up. En route to our coordinates, Rupi streams another segment of Shopaholics Anonymous, hyping her audience up about the chance of finding something valuable. These streams aren't just broadcast over social media, but also Tetra TV, Mustang's entertainment network. This marketing is more important than ever in light of Macilis's recent drop in stock prices. During the operation against Modernia, Syuen's best squad Matisse was unable to participate due to their corruption. Being left out of such a key mission has tanked the company's reputation. It doesn't help that Syuen refuses to wipe Matisse's memories, leading to public unrest. As investors in her company, Rupi, Yen, and Dala are hoping to recoup their losses. By splitting the profits with us, they gain our help clearing away raptures. Despite Talentum's financial woes, none of it compares to the hardships counters have been facing. When Anise and her squad mates complain about needing to use the commander's room just to take a hot shower, Rupi spins it into a narrative where we secretly lure in our Nikkes to do unspeakable things to them. Our misfortune makes for great viewership, apparently. One man's trash is another man's treasure, as the garbage dump is loaded with Godesium, Rapture cores, and old data chips from the first Rapture invasion. All of this can be sold for a fortune. That said, all of our digging through the rubble awakens some dormant raptures. They're easy enough, but then a whole slew of Lord-class raptures emerge from below, hearing the noise. We're left with no choice but to grab what we can and make a run for it. This forces everyone to prioritize only the most valuable items. Back at the Ark, everyone reveals to the livestream what they brought back. Rupi, Yen, and Dala all return with an impressive haul, all things considered. The counters, however, let's just say they tried their best. Our contributions don't amount to jack, which pisses Talentum off. Interrupting the awkwardness comes a major television announcement. Syuen, hoping to get back in the public's good graces, goes public about the existence of Vapaus. Having used what she found on our battlefield, she was able to free Matisse from their corruption without a memory wipe. Their triumphant return totally reverses Macilis's stock problem, and while we're just a bit peeved by Syuen's underhanded means, seeing Matisse back up and running is a good thing overall. What's most concerning is Syuen's declaration that she'll be able to produce more Vapaus going forward, which we know is a blatant lie. We confront Syuen about this ordeal and learn she used up all of the Vapaus bullet. Rather than make more of it, which she can't, she intends to double down on her lies, claiming it's too expensive for practical use. The commander hates this because it gives Nikkes a false sense of hope. In opposition, he threatens to go procure more Vapaus from the surface. It's not much of a threat, considering she too would love to find some more, prompting her to try and strike a deal with us. In exchange for resources and manpower, Syuen asks us to go find Vapaus for her. Of course, she wants to keep our discoveries a secret, which we refuse. Reluctantly, a humbled Syuen relents on the matter, offering her aid without that stipulation. Despite our ambition, we don't actually know where to look. Our only lead is Snow White, who isn't responding to any messages we send her. Rather than wait for a reply, we choose to venture out and find her again. Having Syuen's help is truly a deal with the devil. We can't trust her, and she still tries to pull shit like blackmail, but ridding Nikkes of their corruption is a worthy cause. The commander literally has nightmares about seeing his Nikkes corrupted like Marion. For what it's worth, Syuen plans to send us a mystery squad as backup for our next outing. This is a part in the story where two side events occur. The first, License to Kill, follows the adventures of Perilous Siege, the squad consisting of D and K. Recall that they're assassins, with special permission to harm both humans and other Nikkes. This event does help flesh out Nikke's world, but in the interest of efficiency, I'll be skipping it for now. Maybe one day I'll go back to it. An event we can't ignore, however, is D Outsiders, which features the Outer Rim's Exotic Squad. The actual placement of this event in the overall timeline is a bit tricky. It's not even listed in the game's new storyline mode, almost as if it's being retconned out of existence. Whether it's canon or not, however, I want to cover it before Chapter 16, as it wouldn't make any sense occurring any later. It starts when Heavenly Ascension, the Outer Rim's most notorious terrorist group, threatens to attack the Dome of Eternity and put the Ark into a blackout. Anderson wants us to stop them with the help of Exotic, a squad made up of ex-convicts. This should sound like a stupid idea, because it is. However, the rationale is to recruit criminals, because they can move about the Outer Rim freely without raising suspicion. This, in turn, allows them to gather genuine intel for the central government. Exotic is considered a missileless squad, though one of its members is actually from Tetra. Understandably, the three Nikkes are kept on a tight leash, but as we're about to learn, it ain't tight enough. They're like the Suicide Squad, outfitted with explosive collars that Syuen can detonate at a moment's notice. It doesn't really help that Crow, Exotic's leader, was rumored to be Heavenly Ascension's former leader. I'm just gonna say it like it is. Yes, she was in fact their former leader, responsible for the horrific train bombing that killed Diesel, her brother, Soline, and Brid. She's not the tiniest bit remorseful about it either. I can only assume Crow got killed at some point, and now the central government is forcing her into Nikke servitude. Recall that the Outer Rim is literally where the Ark dumps its trash, as well as where it condemns criminals. Even if you consider that cruelty justice, it stands to reason that children born to the Outer Rim haven't done anything wrong. Crow was born in one of the Outer Rim's sewage dumps, and grew up loathing the Ark and everything it stands for. Understandably, she advocates for the rights of outlaws exiled to the Outer Rim. They barely survive off scraps, and since they can't even protest peacefully, they have no choice but to express themselves through violence. Crow's ambition is to see the Ark burn, viewing anarchy as the only solution. Regarding her Bond story, the commander gets involved when she does nothing to stop a terrorist from attacking the Daily Ark, a newspaper company. Most would write this off as an act of senseless violence, but Crow knew the guy. He was trying to get his daughter out of the Rim by having her adopted by a wealthy couple from the Ark proper. Some sleazy reporter blew the whistle on this illegal act, and now the guy's daughter has been taken away. Crow appreciates our desire to find this girl, leading to the discovery that Elysion has turned her into a Nikke. For as much as the commander wants a better world, his dreams are dismissed as hopelessly naive. Even so, we remain the one commander Crow knows who doesn't contribute to Nikke abuse. However, she does accuse us of enabling it, perpetuating a system that used to revere the Nikkes as goddesses, only to now control them out of fear. No matter how kind we are to her, Crow continues to despise the Ark, even as she's forced to serve it. What little loyalty she has is reserved for her fellow outlaws, but even they are expendable in her quest for anarchy. Viper, by comparison, seems less ambitious, but that's only because she prefers to bide her time before sinking her teeth into a cunning plan. After a life of lying and cheating to survive, she's convinced she can never be a decent person. Thus, she condemns herself to manipulating others with her charm and beauty. In other words, she knows her ways are wicked, but doesn't think she can do anything about it. At the very least, she uses her deception to counter and subdue more heinous crimes in the Outer Rim. During a later operation, the commander works with Viper to uncover a Nikke trafficking ring. She remains one step ahead of him at every turn, taking advantage of his compassion for Nikkes. That said, she can't help but admire that compassion. While her flirting comes as a matter of habit, Viper really does like the commander, much to Crow's dismay. The malicious leader is worried the commander's idealism will dull Viper's fangs, as it were. In general, Viper views the Outer Rim as a cesspool of filthy rats fighting to stay alive, herself included. She's not convinced when the commander tells her she's not a rat, but she does take his sentiment to heart. Even a lowly rat can still dream of something better, even if just for a moment. Otherwise, without hope, she takes the edge off her troubles with an illicit drug called White Dream. Viper's got an old phone filled with numbers, but no names attached to them. All the people she's met are just pawns to her benefit, means to an end. With the commander, though, she wants to legitimately know all about him and dedicate it to memory. We are her one and only honey. For as much as she tries to seduce us, Viper never does make the naughty list, not even in her summer event. Exotic's wild card is Jackal, whom I wouldn't be surprised was actually a feral animal in her previous life. Well, we don't know exactly why, but Jackal behaves more like a pet than a person. She wants nothing more than to cause mayhem and eat snacks, and is known for leaving the site of a rampage with sharp bite marks. While she detests being compared to a dog, she certainly has the temperament of one. Somehow, Crow manages to act as Jackal's keeper, as she's hopelessly loyal to the convict. She lacks an understanding of good versus evil, instead following her reckless instincts in search of praise. After becoming a nuisance at the outpost, the commander takes it upon himself to try and train Jackal, convincing her that good behavior will land her more treats than if she tries stealing them by force. The thing she struggles to grasp is patience, because her human life was spent as a starving child who could only survive by taking action. Waiting never got her anything, as she needed to work all manner of dangerous jobs just to put food on the table. The commander wants to show her a new way of life, one where she's not always rummaging for scraps while running from the law. He promises not to let her go hungry, and she winds up trusting him enough to rein in her antics. Of course, Crow finds the exercise pointless, and tries to tempt Jackal into her old ways. Earlier, she had a bad habit of chomping down on people's wrists, but now she instead licks the commander's, confident he will visit her often and not just abandon her. It's unfortunate that Crow isn't the best caretaker, as she only keeps Jackal around when useful. So yeah, Exotic works for the Ministry of Information under the central government's intelligence agency. They monitor and preserve some degree of order in the Outer Rim by essentially dominating their own slice of it. If it weren't for the bombs around their necks, they'd be just another gang of thugs vying for power. Even though they're technically the government's lackeys, they aren't much help unless there's something in it for them. This makes it tricky when the commander is assigned to investigate Heavenly Ascension with them. Syuen's answer to the problem is just to give us the same app she uses to monitor their callers. If they refuse to cooperate, we can always threaten them, but you know the commander has no intention of actually using the app. This means operating on Exotic's level, organically seeking out the terrorists, without them simply selling out their own kind. Along the way, we help out Joseph, a petty businessman in the Outer Rim, when caught in a conflict with some giant brute peddling drugs. Joseph happens to be a bottom-tier member of Heavenly Ascension, and agrees to leak information to us as thanks for our earlier aid. As he puts it, he didn't want to join a group of terrorists, but had no choice, as he's a former ARC citizen whose ID chip was stolen. That night, Viper takes the commander to a fancy hotel in Ephialtes, the Outer Rim's biggest entertainment district. This place may be a dumping ground for criminals and literal trash, but it's also the perfect place for corrupt elites in the ARC proper to indulge in their own white-collar crimes. For example, the Nikke trafficking I mentioned earlier. Sleazy aristocrats from Royal Road or the central government will sneak into Ephialtes clubs to make use of Nikke prostitutes. In this case, Viper wants some undisturbed privacy with us. It sounds raunchy, but she's mainly taking the opportunity to confront us about Exotic Controller, Syuen's detonation app. The fact that it's installed on our phone is seen as an immediate breach of trust. As punishment, Viper swaps her phone with ours until the mission is over. She'll handle any of our contacts for us. The next day, we meet with Joseph again, who claims the people responsible for threatening the Dome of Eternity are laying low with money earned through scams. We can track them down by following recent financial transactions. When it's clear the commander plans to take them into police custody, protecting the Ark's citizens over the Outer Rim, Joseph shows his true colors. It's no surprise that he winds up being the culprit, attacking us with a small force of mass-produced Nikkes who've had their limiters tampered with. Exotic emerges victorious, claiming they suspected Joseph from the start, but wanted to use us to bait him into lashing out. This only works because Joseph made his threats without Heavenly Ascension's full approval. Crow can apprehend him under the guise of eliminating a troublesome loose thread. Having been caught, Joseph vents some perfectly reasonable complaints about the central government and its scummy practices. He wanted to shut off the Dome of Eternity since it never shined light on the Outer Rim. Taking his words to heart, we aren't exactly proud of arresting him, but it's still our duty. At the very least, we deem it better to turn him in to the central government than let Heavenly Ascension punish him for acting out of line. With the issue resolved, Viper gives back our phone, having taken some lewd selfies with it for our troubles. Aw, how thoughtful. Overall, this joint operation with Exotic seems like a good bonding exercise. Still, Anderson takes note of our disappointment and assures us that it's normal to feel hesitant about maintaining order. Our choices aren't always morally straightforward, and while the central government does provide structure, it's far from the perfect organization. Personally, I consider this event a more thorough introduction to Exotic than Chapter 16. As you'll soon learn, it doesn't really make sense placing it any later on the timeline. Syuen plans on sending us up to the surface with a squad she recruits, but there's a mix-up. Presumably, it's the scouts who are supposed to join us, a squad consisting of Delta and Signal. They specialize in recon and mapping out the land. Even though they're Elysion Nikkes, that doesn't necessarily mean Syuen can't hire them. We've already seen her threaten to make use of Perilous Siege, who are also from Elysion. The thing is, however, Exotic Squad beats the scouts to the punch, insisting they're the ones Syuen sent. Given how they're a Macillus squad, and Syuen never specified who'd be joining us, we naively take their word for it. According to data from Alice and Ludmilla, Snow White was last spotted in a region called the Mage's Zone, where alpha particles are so dense that it blocks all Arc communications. Jackal, feisty as ever, is excited to rampage without anyone interfering. Crow reminds her they're working for the commander now, but she's not exactly the most reassuring advocate. Viper claims they want to redeem themselves, and even though they pledge to be on their best behavior, Rapi, Anise, and Neon remain on edge. The commander is too quick to trust ex-cons and a former terrorist. Thus, our whole journey becomes a debate on the ethics of terrorism. Crow advocates for outlaws, viewing them as freedom fighters trying to assert their deserved rights. Anise can't deny how fucked up the Ark is, but just because she hates most people, that doesn't mean she's willing to harm the innocent. Even the commander can agree that Nikkes deserve better treatment, and that his sentiment could get him in trouble with the central government. Jackal carelessly steps onto a frozen lake and almost sinks in. Freezing wet, she's comforted when we drape our jacket over her. While Crow concedes the commander's generosity is sincere and rare, she still asserts his gestures are performative. When push comes to shove, he will treat his Nikke as pawns. Everything has a breaking point. This poor attitude continues to brew tension between the two squads. Fortunately, the counters don't let Crow ruin their opinion of us. For just a brief moment, the commander gets a signal, along with several texts from Syuen. As expected, she's not thrilled by our lack of progress, and mentions something about striking a deal with Ingrid. She still thinks we're traveling with the scouts, having no reason to consider we've been duped. Unfortunately, the signal cuts off just before we can inquire further. At the Land of Mages, we have our Nikkes split up to search for Snow White. In an old building, Viper finds a map of the area left behind by pioneers. It happens to include where they plan to meet up next. When Crow learns about this, she informs her squad that they'll be using the intel to punish their goody two-shoes commander. Viper happens to know the location of a dangerous rapture nearby, so Exotic fakes a version of the map leading to those coordinates instead. The map we get to see points us to a nearby lighthouse. Anise and Neon rightfully point out how Exotic could have tampered with the map. Nonetheless, the commander wants to put his faith in them, so we set out for the lighthouse in the morning. In the meantime, the commander visits Crow, and she shows him an archived news report going around online. It comments on Syuen's recent announcement, initially praising the CEO for offering a cure for corruption. However, one dude in the arc, conveniently labeled John Doe, criticizes Vapaus. Even if it can cure corruption, it only does so by destroying a Nikke's nymph. That, in turn, frees a Nikke from human control. John Doe has started fear-mongering the public that Nikkes with freedom are a threat to society. Crow thinks humans should fear a Nikke uprising, as many of them are sure to be fed up with years of Nikke phobia. Even though we acknowledge this possibility, we still want to give Nikkes the choice to be free. Hearing our words, Crow admits she no longer wants to kill us. I guess we'll take that as a compliment? Probably shouldn't, though, as this whole lighthouse charade is a trap, and she really does want to kill us. The counters are led into a rapture encounter, followed up by a flashbang. In that brief moment, Jackal and Viper hold off our Nikkes while Crow takes us hostage. Separated from the others, Crow lectures the commander on her belief system. She's written us off as an exception. Whatever compassion we have for Nikkes is just a nuisance in her plan to have the arc destroy itself from within. In other words, she'd rather bet on her own scheme than believe our naive dreams will amount to anything. To prevent us from interfering, she casually pulls off what should be impossible. She shoots us, not directly, but vicariously from ricocheting her bullet off an iron plate in the ground. Normally, even this would be forbidden by a Nikke's inhibitor, but Crow is just so mentally warped that she can delude herself into thinking she's firing at something else. Dai-chan mentioned this in a previous spoiler segment, but by altering their mental image, Nikkes can bypass their inhibitors. Recall how Scarlet's sister Rose circumvented it by covering her eyes with a blindfold. Crow's method works too, leaving us bleeding out in isolation. We pass out in the snow a lot. Back at the Ark, John Doe's Nikke-phobic paranoia has begun to spread. Matisse, who just want to reclaim their position as heroes, are depressed by the news. It's truly ironic, given what just happened with Crow. Here we have some Nikkes freed from their nymph who have no intention of betraying humans. Meanwhile, someone like Crow can plot against the Ark, even though her nymph is still fully active. There are good and bad apples. Laplace, Maxwell, and Drake just want to earn back the people's trust. Syuen's also watching the news and takes her anger out on Uni and Mihara. She literally beats them up, and while that's normally something Mihara would be down for, this is just too much. All the praise Syuen had just earned is now inverted thanks to this John Doe person. Her assistant Rion receives intel that John isn't actually a single person, but rather multiple sources tracking back to the Outer Rim. Since this falls under exotic jurisdiction, Syuen tries to contact them, only to finally notice they're on the surface. Realizing she's been tricked by her own Nikkes, Syuen resumes abusing Uni. This continues until Mihara begs to take her place. At this point, neither of them want the other getting hurt. Exotic makes their way back to the Ark, meeting up in a secluded bar in the Outer Rim. Jackal's happy to make Syuen angry, though isn't too pleased about hurting the commander. Crow reveals she's the true master behind the John Doe rumors, though that's not too surprising. She's been getting members of Heavenly Ascension to spread the rumors from multiple sources, making them harder to track down. Even though things are going according to plan, Crow wonders if the commander will really die from his wounds. After all, she didn't have a clear shot. Viper thinks we're still alive, given all the impossible odds we've defied thus far. Naturally, she doesn't actually want us to die. Given the possibility of survival, Crow accepts it and begins planning for round 2. Perhaps more than killing us, she wants to break our spirit, to shatter our naive idealism. Sure enough, the commander isn't dead. Even though the counters were taken off guard, they sent out a distress signal. They also recklessly fired their weapons into the air, even though it drew the attention of raptures. Still, their efforts pay off when Rapunzel finds the commander unconscious and gets a bit distracted by his abs. Despite her lewd thoughts, she takes healing us very seriously. Crow's bullet missed our vitals, but we're still gonna be in pain for a good while, requiring Rapunzel's help just to stand. After reuniting with our squad, we discuss our plans going forward. Not wanting to return empty-handed, the commander suggests continuing the search for Vaphaus. Regardless of our decision, we at least need to move to a safer locale, and Rapunzel shows us to an abandoned building. In private, she nearly lets her perverse intentions get the better of her, offering information on Vaphaus in exchange for him having his way with her. Oddly, the commander refuses, much to her dismay. Even so, Rapunzel compromises to take us with her when she meets the rest of Pioneer. Their destination is a place they call the Promised Land, and somehow, it only opens up on the first day of every month. Anise wants to take the commander home, but relents given the opportunity. She's become incredibly protective of us, especially now that she let Exotic pull one over on us. Deep down, she worries that Crow has made us resentful of Nikke's, but we know not to treat them all the same. Such as people are each different, so are Nikke's. Normally, Rapunzel's hair can hide her presence from raptures, but she's not able to extend that ability to our whole party. Thankfully though, the counters are more motivated than ever to keep us safe. Our camaraderie makes Rapunzel feel nostalgic. On the eve of a new moon, we finally find the other pilgrims at their meeting place. There, we take the chance to grill Snow White on why she hasn't been responding over the phone. Apparently, she was just too distracted to bother checking her notifications. Oof. The commander can't help but notice Marion isn't with them. I've already covered how Marion is now in the custody of the White Knight Squad, but this is the first time the commander hears about it. If Snow can trust in Chime and Crown, then so can he. Raptures try to break up our pleasant reunion, but Pioneer is excited to fight together for the first time in a while. Scarlet invites us to be their commander for a time, giving counters a break for once. With the threat exterminated, we get down to business. Does Snow White know where to find more Vaphaus? Even better, can it be mass-produced? The mere suggestion causes Snow White and the other pilgrims to scorn us, demanding an explanation. Scarlet warns us to choose our words carefully, offering us the chance to take back what we said. Instead, the commander tries to explain himself. At this point, we know all about Nymph and how humanity uses it to effectively abuse Nikke's. Mihara had her memories erased, and they tried to do the same thing to Rapi. Then there's Marion. We never want to see a Nikke suffer corruption like that ever again. Nymph is to blame for all of these things. However, Pioneer reminds us that the Nymph is sometimes beneficial. Some Nikkes want their memories erased, as it helps them endure tough situations. Plus, given what we've seen from Chatterbox, even a Nikke's organic brain can still be corrupted, and without Vaphaus to take the damage, they'd have no choice but to undergo a full neurowipe like Marion did. Even so, it's at this point that we assert our desire to give all Nikkes a choice, to make Vaphaus available to those who want it. Even though our dream would be interpreted as heresy by the central government, even though it would take a massive cultural shift to actually implement, the three pioneers finally agreed to tell us more. In the past, Vaphaus was discovered by accident. While confronting a heretic, someone's blood had a unique effect on her. After some analysis, this blood was synthesized into an effective weapon against the heretics. Unfortunately, there was only one person who had the rare blood type needed to produce Vaphaus, and he just happened to be Pioneer's former commander. Rather than exploit him, the former goddesses chose to keep Vaphaus a secret. Otherwise, their beloved commander would have been taken from the battlefield and sucked dry, and not in the way Rapunzel would imagine. Given that this was all 100 years ago, we're skeptical that this commander is still alive. I mean, why would he be? For an explanation of that, stay tuned for the Dai-chan segment at the end. That said, a portion of that commander's blood was secured for a time in an institute, where it was made into Vaphaus bullets. There's no guarantee any of those bullets remain, but if any still do, then they're at the institute, which happens to be south of the Ark by a giant lake. We need to be prepared, not just for the stronger raptures down south, but also the massive societal shift Vaphaus will bring about. With all that settled, the pilgrims part ways, with Rapunzel offering to take us back to the Ark. As we make our exit, we remind Snow White to be more aware of her phone signal, and to tell Marion to wear her underwear properly. We obviously still miss her. On the journey home, Rapi brings up the name Red Hood, and how she heard the Pioneers mention it in passing. She wants to confirm her suspicion that the members of Pioneer are former goddesses. Rapunzel admits the truth, though it's not like she was actively trying to hide it. We've known this whole time, but neither the commander nor counters had any clue till now. More importantly, Rapunzel wants to know how Rapi knows of Red Hood. Let's just say they have a history together. There's an entire event, Footstep Walk Run, which explains what went down. I promise to cover it when it's most relevant. For now though, just don't forget how in the Red Ash event's epilogue, Red Hood wound up sleeping for 30 years before running into a mass-produced model called Rapi. Anyway, Rapunzel is relieved to learn the people in the Ark still view the goddesses in a positive light. Anise offers to look into what happened to the legendary commander, but Rapunzel fearfully declines, worried that any bad news would be too much to bear. In the best-case scenario, that he's still alive, she's still trying to focus on her mission. In time, Rapunzel takes her leave, parting with confidence that we have an admirable purpose in life. That's not what we're worried about, though. Instead, the commander warns counters that what we're doing is risky, and will no doubt gain us some enemies down the line. By now, though, they're more than willing to follow us into the depths of hell, if that's what it takes, of course. Inside the Ark, we wonder why Syuen hasn't contacted us. The answer is obvious when we reach Massilis headquarters. A huge crowd surrounds the building, demanding Matisse have their nymph reinstalled. Given all this chaos, when we finally reach Syuen, she offers to meet us at the outpost. There, she suspects us of working with John Doe. She's so pissed and irrational that she refuses to hear our side of the story regarding Exotic. Instead, she complains that the Ark's citizens have taken their peaceful lives for granted. They've forgotten how Nikkes keep them safe, and need a good scare to remind them. Her plan is to deliberately lure raptures to the Ark and have Matisse vanquish them in a big publicity stunt. The Nikkes everyone currently fears will come out looking like heroes again. In exchange for the commander's help, Syuen promises to make him a hero too, one on par with the legendary commander. Considering how much she hates us, and hates how interacting with us always leads to trouble, she sure is sounding pretty desperate. Upon first refusal, she tries to appeal to our compassion for Nikkes. If we were willing to put humanity at risk to save Marion, how is this going to be any different? A few weak raptures being led to the Ark will be child's play for Matisse, but since the public doesn't know that, they'll eat it up. The commander once promised he would save those girls, but if this isn't the way, then what the hell is? Truly at the end of her rope, Syuen is willing to grovel and beg. To her surprise, the commander finally agrees to her plan, but refuses to gain any clout from it. He doesn't want the cameras to focus on him at all. The counters refuse to let us go alone, and insist on providing backup, also out of view of the cameras. Since that won't take the spotlight from Matisse, Syuen reluctantly accepts. Turns out, Uni and Mihara were listening to this conversation from the hallway. The former is thrilled to hear Syuen begging. After what happened to Mihara, Uni wants Massilis to collapse under its own weight. She wants Matisse to fail and get their memories wiped. While I think she has every right to be angry, to curse this unfair world, Mihara just wants her to find happiness. Ideally, the two of them could escape Syuen and go somewhere they can't be bothered. Instead, Uni is caught up in maniacal laughter. Syuen's plan has one major caveat. Matisse is too benevolent for their own good, even Drake. Laplace, in particular, would never agree to put the Ark in danger just to improve her reputation. This means Syuen and the commander will have to lie to them. Not mentioning the raptures at all, Syuen instead briefs them on her plan to erect a protective barrier around the Ark. Massilis is going to debut a new defense wall, and Matisse will be the ones to activate it from an institute just outside the Ark. The commander reluctantly plays along, lying through his teeth even though he knows it's wrong. In private, Syuen tries to claim she wasn't lying at all. From a certain point of view, Matisse will be the Ark's new defense wall. This isn't very assuring.
Hey guys, Dai-chan here, and this time I really will be covering some spoilers. You can click off now if you want to, but I encourage you to revisit these ending segments sometime later. I don't just spoil things for fun, I analyze how the events Dai-kun covers fit within the larger narrative. Let's start with exotic. Hopefully now you can see why I don't think D outsiders would fit anywhere else. It wouldn't make sense for the commander to just waltz up to Crow after she tried to kill him. Knowing the fallout of her big terrorist plot makes things even clearer. Can't exactly join up with Crow while she's in jail. That wouldn't make sense either. Then again, does anything about exotic make sense? Historically speaking, governments and law enforcement have been known to recruit former criminals, especially as it pertains to fraud and cybercrime. Who better to track down a thief than another thief? If you've got someone who can break through your security, wouldn't it be nice if they could instead use that knowledge to build something even more secure? That part makes sense to me. What doesn't is why Crow of all people would have been chosen. It's supposed to be a rumor that Crow used to lead Heavenly Ascension, but it's extremely obvious. You'd have to be an idiot not to know, or at least know she still has ties with them. Her lack of remorse is another huge flag. It's safe to say some of the blame for this falls on Enoch, as her judgments are what enable Crow to remain at large. When she stands by and watches as others terrorize the Ark, Enoch gives her a pass, assuming she just didn't want to interfere in an interpersonal conflict between humans. Even if they have disagreements, it seems everyone abides by Enoch's rulings anyway. While it's true that a group of criminals can blend in with the Outer Rim and influence its activities, the Ark already has a squad for that. Underworld Queen consists of 3 Tetra Nikkes, who each run their own syndicates in the Outer Rim. As far as I'm aware, they aren't ex-convicts, and are way more trustworthy. At a certain point, though, I have to wonder, isn't the Ark trying too hard to control the Outer Rim, when that same effort could be used to help improve its conditions? Crow does have a point regarding desperation. When people aren't given a proper way to live, they do what they can to stay alive. That doesn't inherently justify violence or crime, but it should be a wake-up call to those running society. Then again, there are people in the central government who like the Outer Rim, treating it as a place they can visit to indulge in sinful acts. Kinda hard to fix a system when you benefit from it. Again, it's really frustrating that Anderson is still alive, but hasn't reunited with his squad. Since it's his blood that can make Vapaus, he knows the commanders can too. I know it's risky to make that public knowledge, but it still would have been nice to know about back when he gave us that blood transfusion. Then again, I suppose the commander would try to sacrifice himself for the sake of all Nikkes, even though Vapaus isn't actually as reliable as we all think. Sometimes it can cure corruption, others, it can halt a heretic's regeneration. Just as much, however, it can actually empower a heretic, as is the case with the 4 beasts. From what little Vapaus is left in the story, one of those bullets is used to try and poison the queen, but it doesn't do jack shit, at least not to her new body. Overall, I think keeping Anderson and the commander alive is better than risking them to create more bullets, which are a wild card. Historically, the most successful case of it winds up being Cinderella. Neither Anderson nor Pioneer can so easily accept that Enichiro is actually cured. That's gotta contribute to why Snow White was so upset we wanted to make more. Had she watched the Old Tales event, I'm sure she'd have a different perspective on Vapaus. It's fascinating how the pilgrims try to warn us about a cultural shift within the Ark. If it weren't for Crow stirring up everyone's paranoia, would anyone have actually cared? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy to worry how people will react while actively provoking that reaction. If the masses are so easily manipulated, can't we provoke them into a more optimistic direction? Well, it's probably easier to invoke fear than courage, which is sad. When it comes to stories as dense as Nikke's, it can be hard to keep things logically consistent. The writers bring us all sorts of cool ideas, but some of them seem to contradict each other. Where I'm seeing this most is in regard to human lifespan. When the Ark was first built, getting in was treated as a huge deal. You needed a ticket, and those without one were left to die banging on the elevator door. It's a huge deal when a single survivor turns up during the Stellar Blade collab, and even then, he's barely hanging on with fancy life support. Yet, there are numerous accounts of people remembering life on the surface. There's also Captain Jack from Helm's Bond story, who's able to reprise his role in the sequel to a century-old movie. Then there are elders like Nora, who feel nostalgic about the Ark's artificial rain. They remember the real thing because they used to live up there for a time. How the hell is that possible? It's easy to miss, but there is in fact an answer. The event, For Rest, finally introduces Evergreen, a government-approved anti-aging drug. It used to be so expensive that only the elite or wealthy sovereigns could obtain any, but has since become more commonplace. Thanks to Evergreen, it's not unheard of for there to be pre-invasion humans still wandering around the Ark. I'm so glad to finally have an explanation for that. I've gotta confess, I found that particular event really boring and didn't pay enough attention. I also wasn't planning to make this series back when it came out. Now that I am, however, I hope you trust that I will always inform you to the best of my ability. If you ever notice me making errors or leaving out key details, write about it in the comments and I'll convey what I learn in a later episode. Next time, we'll resume the story with Chapter 18. Things are about to get crazy. Until next time, celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Mystic Samurai 1983, Otaku Mom, Free Brick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Calum, Saul Soto, Matal Mataru, Winter's Edge, Sneer Cachette, Foxbox, Alzinga Fagan, Caitlin P, Sith Lord 906, Vladimirovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X77, and Alistair Bernadotte. Thank you all so much.